Hello everybody, we're here today, you're watching Irakoze on YouTube, and we're here today to talk about David Coffin, who you see there, and Scott Davis, who you see there, and also the dishonest nature of Megan Bruton, who you saw there. This is a wholly circumstantial case that hinges on the fact that Megan manipulated the situation, and Scott may very well be innocent. So we're going to go over some of those things here today and in videos to come. Alright, somebody would have had to come down from one of those tall buildings you just saw and to come out onto the street with their car, either from one of these parking structures or get to one of these parking lots and pull their car out onto the street. Okay, hi folks, how you doing today? We're here to talk again about Scott Davis. Today we're doing a little drive time video. As maybe some of you might know, the prosecution has claimed, has always said that Scott must have been able to get from his place of business, which was right there at those buildings you just saw, to this little place over on Fernwood Circle. And so what we're going to see here today is the exact amount of time it would take. And the interesting thing here today, folks, is that the prosecution claims Scott did this drive on a Tuesday at roughly somewhere between 10:15 and 11:15 roughly, where he drove over from his work to this place where the Porsche was burned. So we're demonstrating here today that drive, but instead of doing it on a Tuesday during lunchtime traffic, you know, around, like I said, 11 o'clock, we're doing it on a Sunday, because obviously this is 20 years later, and the traffic conditions on a Tuesday now would be much worse than they were 20 years ago. So to offset that, we are doing this video here where it's being done on a Sunday afternoon, and as you can see, there's very little obstruction. There's not a whole lot of cars. Our lovely assistant Susie Q is basically kind of flowing down the avenues here. Now she's going to be getting on the freeway. But there's not a whole lot of obstruction here, as I was saying. So there's not a whole lot of things that are getting in the way. And I think that's crucial, because that means with light traffic conditions, which most likely are not going to be encountered on a Tuesday around the hour of 11 a.m., this drive still takes some time. And then you have to factor in the time I was telling you at the beginning, which is 2 to 5 minutes for Scott to be able to get down from the 27th floor of the building that he worked in, get his car, either get out of the parking structure he was parked in, or walk out of the building over to the parking lot where he had his car parked. And so this would all take time. So that would all be time on top of the time that it takes for this drive. So that's what we're looking at here today, folks. I gotta also say it's very interesting for me to watch this video, because I've never really seen downtown Atlanta like this, or close up, and it's really interesting, and I think it's actually pretty beautiful. It's very nice, and I really like a lot of the stonework and the trees, and there's just, it's very nice, I gotta say. But as you can see, our lovely assistant here, Miss Susie Q, she's not really going easy on it. She's driving pretty assertively. She's not just sandbagging it or whatever. Basically, she's looking if there's an opening where she can go a little bit faster, because somebody in front of her is going a little slower. She gets over and goes into the quicker lane and goes ahead and tries to make some more progress towards the destination. So I just think that goes to show here, this video is going to be a very, very accurate time of somebody who was driving with some intent from Scott's work over to the location where the Porsche was set on fire. Somebody with some fairly intent purposeful driving, wanting to get there quick, will get there in the time that you will see in this video. The prosecution claims that this was able to be done in 12 minutes. Right. Can you imagine what this freeway right here would look like at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday? Even in 1996. Can you imagine? I mean, I know the freeways where I live, and anything that goes near downtown at 11 o'clock is a nightmare. Even 20 years ago, it was a nightmare at that time. I mean, so that's why I think the offset of the fact that this is being done on a Sunday afternoon with obviously minimal obstruction and minimal traffic, with our lovely assistant, Ms. Susie Q, driving assertively and not, just, getting behind somebody slow and just waiting, but driving assertively, but not dangerously. I wanted to go ahead and make sure I made that statement out loud, because clearly assertive is not dangerous. She sees that one lane is open and moving, and she can go to the freeway top speed in that lane, and she does. So that is probably not what somebody who was doing what the prosecution is suggesting happened here. They are probably not going to care too much about speed limits, but they probably should a little bit, because if they're going to a scene to burn something, they certainly didn't want to pick up a tail on the way. They certainly didn't want to be speeding or running a red light on the way and get the attention of a black and white that could then end up following them to their destination where they were going to burn this Porsche, according to the prosecution, which all happens in 12 minutes, according to the prosecution. I will say this, the prosecution does have one other theory of what happened. In a completely circumstantial case, when they realized that Scott's alibi on this was really pretty solid, they then tried to say, oh, he had an accomplice. No proof of this. They have nothing to suggest that he had an accomplice. Absolutely zero anything to suggest really that there was an accomplice, other than the fact that they couldn't explain how Scott could do that, get from his place of work where he was in a meeting until a certain time. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. It's impossible that Scott did it, but because they couldn't get that to work, they just it was an accomplice. He had an accomplice without any proof of it. So that's why in a wholly circumstantial case, as the Scott Davis case is, you have to take into account this kind of stuff, because this matters. I mean, you can see that our lovely assistant, Miss Susie Q here, is not really encountering much resistance on the road. Even right there where it got a little clogged up, she happened to get over into the lane that was pretty clear and got past it pretty quick. And, is not really moving slowly towards the destination. And I think that's important, because I doubt that even in 1996, the conditions would have been like this in, like I said, at about 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I think that it would be highly unrealistic to think that the traffic conditions would be this good at that time, even in 1996. So it's very interesting to think about here. So the reason why our lovely assistant here has gotten over into the right lanes, because she's going to be transitioning to a different freeway here in a minute, I believe, or getting off the freeway, possibly. I'm not sure which yet. Like I said, I don't know downtown Atlanta, but like I said, it is very lovely. And I gotta say, some of it actually looks like where I live. I live in the city, and I gotta say, looking at some of the stuff that you can see on the freeway, and it's funny. It seems like everywhere in the United States buys the bricks for their freeway walls from the same place. But anyways, no, seriously though, it is a lovely looking place. I mean, I love all the trees and driving around on the freeways with all the greenery and the foliage. It's, I think, pretty nice, very lovely looking. So I also think that a lot of the freeways here are all looking really clean. They look very nice and well kept. But so here we go. We've transitioned, and as before, like I said, very little resistance traffic wise. I mean, there's really no. It's not backed up. It's not bottlenecking really. It's just a very straight on flow to the destination. Now, right here is where the video, unfortunately, the camera that this was recorded on, recorded in 10-minute loops. But if you guys want to, you can go back and rewind it back to the about 10-minute and 34-second mark. Anyway, that's the mark where it jumps. You can see it basically just jumps two or 3 seconds, because that's how much time it took the camera to shut down the first loop and start the second loop. As you can see, the cars remain the same. They just moved a little bit because there was like 2 or 3 seconds missing. But everything else there is the same, and you can see that the time is still the same. It's 3 o'clock with and 9 minutes and whatever over here. Down in the bottom right corner, by the way, if anybody didn't notice that. The time is down there. This whole thing started at 2:58 and 15 seconds. Just in case anybody was wondering what the start time on it was. That's what it was. It was 2:58 and 15 seconds. You guys can all go back and check on that if you like. You just go back to the beginning of the video and go down and enlarge that if you're having trouble seeing it, and you'll see that at the beginning of the video it starts at 2:58 and 15 seconds. So we're now moving along here. We're on some of these streets. Now imagine here, if Scott was doing what they're suggesting on this stretch of streets here, can you imagine that he would not be encountering traffic here, or the lights, that he would just get so lucky that the lights are green, like they have happened to be here for our lovely assistant Susie Q. I gotta imagine that there might have been more cars, first off, just more a heavier flow, and might not have gotten so lucky in catching a lot of the lights like our lovely assistant is here. So, but as you can see, we're already past 12 minutes, folks. And if you add the 2.5 to 5 minutes it would take to get down from the 27th floor, you can see we're well over. We're well over, right? And you've seen the way that this drive went. It's been pretty much flowing the whole time. There was maybe a couple points where Susie Q got slowed down for a little bit, but most of the time this has been pretty much a flow from point A to point B with really very little obstruction or interference. So here we finally have a stoplight where we're, not finally, there was another stoplight, but I'm saying that they haven't happened to be frequent, but that's fine. Maybe Scott, according to their theory, maybe Scott just caught all the lights for their theory to work, right? Which is a silly thing to assume. You can never assume that somebody caught all the lights to fit your theory. I mean, nobody ever. How often does it ever happen that you catch all of the lights? Especially when you're in a hurry or need to. How often has it ever happened that you caught all the lights in a situation like that? Think about it. Anyway, but my point is now we are stopped at a light here, so yeah, that takes a second. But as I said, we're already well over the 12 minutes. And if you add in the time, as I said, it takes to descend from the 27th floor, then, we're even way more well over that. So I really think it's pretty much beyond a doubt impossible that the prosecution could try to suggest that Scott, in a 12-minute period, could have gotten from his office building all the way to where we're going now, basically. So, but here we go. As we got past that left turn, the light that was holding us up, and here we are, pretty free flowing, not a lot of obstruction, able to go the road's top speed pretty much. As I said, our driver is assertive, isn't just past that car right there, so I mean, this is a pretty straight line drive, when you look at it, and it takes well over 12 minutes. It's over 15 minutes now. That's it's just impossible what the prosecution suggests. And that's a lot of, when you look at the prosecution's case, it's a lot of it's just implausible or not really very convincing, because they're trying to squeeze Scott into doing this into so many tight little windows. It's amazing, that they think that Scott killing somebody for the first time in a heat of passion could be so diabolical that he could be fitting all these actions in between his real life and into these tight little windows. I mean, it's just far-fetched. It's far-fetched and doesn't make a lot of sense. But the state used some pretty despicable tactics. Number one, the fact that 72 pieces of evidence were lost, and a great deal of it was lost in the 1 or 2 years leading up to the trial. They had waited 8 years, 9 years to come after Scott again. And when they did, the 1 or 2 years leading up to trial, pretty much most of the evidence of the 72 pieces that went missing in those 2 years, those 1 or 2 years leading up to the trial. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. And then, not only that, the defense gets to see none of those pieces of evidence, right? But the state, who did all the testing on all those things and on everything, all the testing they did on all that stuff, still gets to come in as evidence. Yeah. Can you believe that? Scott doesn't get to see that evidence. His lawyers don't get to bring in any experts to test it independently and have a way to really refute the evidence being offered by the state. I mean, it's an absolute rigged game. 72 pieces. This is not, look, we're not talking 5 or 6, 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 or maybe even a dozen, right? We're not talking about 72. You understand that is 6 dozen. That's 6 dozens. It's unbelievable. So here we are. We got a little bit caught up again on this street here, but now it's starting to move, and we're getting towards the end of the little trip here. But yeah, this trip is clearly taken. It's getting almost now to, it's about 17 and a half minutes or so that this drive is taken. And as I said, I mean, you people saw, right? You guys could see there wasn't really much obstructing this drive. Most of it was pretty free-flowing at, pretty much whichever highway or street it was at that particular highway's top speed, pretty much, without a whole lot of, traffic or heavy flow that was slowing things down. It's been pretty smooth, and it just takes way too long to get from point A to point B. So there is a possible video in the works for the future, where we're going to try and do the same drive, but we're going to try and do it at about 3 a.m. and see how quickly this drive could be done in absolute optimal conditions, where there's absolutely very, very, very little traffic at 3 a.m. in the morning, point A to point B. How long does it take then? Then we can pretty much count on that traffic hour in 1996 on a Tuesday, at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, would certainly take longer than 12 minutes, right? So here we are. We're now approaching, it's about 19 minutes. So it's 19 minutes that it's taken here so far. And yeah, I mean, it's impossible to me that they, even in 1996, that they believe that this could have been driven and done like this, basically. I mean, I just don't, it doesn't make sense. It's not possible. So here we are, we're at Fernwood Circle. There's the street sign right there. So this is where the the Porsche was burned. You can see now we're about 19 and a half minutes. Took 19 and a half minutes in conditions that were really just not that heavy at all. So now let's talk about Detective Walker. So in addition to this whole drive time thing not being really possible, and like I said, we'll try and go further to prove that even more clearly in the future. But we also have the fact that recently the co-lead detective in the Scott Davis investigation recently signed an affidavit that he turned over 2 interrogation tapes to the Fulton County DA's office. The reason why that's important, folks, is because the DA's office and Officer Chambers, the other co-lead detective, all the Georgia agencies have been claiming that there was only one tape, there was only ever one tape, there was only one tape, there was only one tape. Well, recently, Scott's legal team got some experts to listen to the tape, and they determined that you could hear the sounds on the tape. Like, actually, on the tape, you could hear the sounds of another tape recorder, because old cassette tapes used to make a pretty distinctive sound when you ejected them from one of those recording machines or whatever, and they pop out and they make a kind of a unique sound. And the experts were able to analyze that sound and basically prove that you could hear a second tape on the one tape, that the one interrogation tape that was turned in as evidence, right? So now, in addition to those experts, we now have the co-lead detective on the case has now signed the affidavit. He turned over 2 tapes to the Fulton County DA. That means now the Fulton County DA's office has lied, and the lead investigator in the case, Detective Chambers, lied. We can say the other agencies maybe didn't know, but at least they knew, because Chambers was there at the interrogation, just like Detective Walker was. And the Fulton County DA's office clearly just had 2 tapes turned over to them, as I've just told you, because Detective Walker signed the affidavit saying so. So that means that means Chambers and the Fulton County DA's office have committed a Brady violation, a huge one. So, I mean, to me, what it also suggests is that with 72 pieces of evidence missing and everything else, what else have they possibly done? So, anyway, that's about it, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe.